Welcome to our deep dive today. You know, I'm so fascinated by what awaits us after this life, and I know you are too.
It's a question that's captivated people for centuries.
For sure.
And as Catholics, we have such a rich wellspring of,
Insight.
insight exactly to draw from.
It's amazing.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. So we're going to be exploring the afterlife
Yes.
through the lens of our faith, and we'll be looking at these incredible accounts from the saints and those who've had near-death experiences.
Yes. It's fascinating because when you look at it, you see these common threads running through these experiences across different times and cultures. And I think it speaks to, it offers us these glimpses into a reality that's often beyond our comprehension.
It is.
But it resonates so deeply with our spiritual longings.
Right. Let's start with heaven.
Okay.
I love the descriptions of radiant light and this overwhelming love that people experience. And it's so consistent.
It is.
Across all these different accounts.
Yeah, think about St. John the Evangelist's vision of the heavenly Jerusalem from the book of Revelation. He talks about streets paved with gold.
Oh, yeah.
And gates of pearl. But what really defines heaven for him is the glory of God.
Right.
Which he describes as light.
Wow.
It's not just about material splendor. It's about the very presence of God.
I see.
Which illuminates and transforms everything.
That's so beautiful. And it makes you realize that the physical beauty is almost secondary.
Exactly.
To the spiritual reality.
Yes. And that's where I think the accounts of NDEs become so powerful.
Okay.
Because many people who have had near-death experiences describe encountering this radiant, loving light.
Yes.
That they identify as Jesus or God.
It's amazing.
And they speak of this overwhelming sense of peace and love.
Yeah.
A feeling of being completely enveloped in divine grace.
It's amazing how those modern accounts echo the visions of the saints.
Yes.
Even though they're coming from such different contexts.
You really do.
Like you think about St. Teresa of Avila. She's a doctor of the church. And she had this vision where she gradually saw Jesus's hands and face. And she talks about it as this experience filled with this incredible beauty and majesty.
And majesty, yes.
That words couldn't capture.
It's interesting, isn't it, how she describes it as a gradual unveiling? It's as if the human soul can only grasp this divine reality in stages.
Wow.
It speaks to the immensity of God's presence and I think the limitations of our earthly perception.
Right. And it's not just the light, visual element of the light. It's also that profound joy and peace that permeates those experiences.
Absolutely. St. Faustina Kowalska, the Apostle of Divine Mercy,
Yeah.
she wrote extensively about her visions of heaven. And she describes this unconceivable beauty and happiness that awaits us after death, where all creatures are praising God. And this joy in God spills over into everything.
Wow.
So I think it's a vision that offers us tremendous hope and reminds us that our ultimate destiny is to share in this eternal bliss.
Right. And I think what always captivated me, too, is the heavenly landscapes that people experience. And it's not just an ethereal void.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's streets of gold and
gates of pearl.
All that. But there's this vibrant sense of place.
Absolutely. Take, for example, St. John Bosco, who had a vision of a landscape blue as the calmest sea, filled with vast gardens and enchanting music. Or St. Perpetua, who saw a golden ladder leading to this beautiful garden where Christ himself was tending to his sheep.
It's amazing how those descriptions of paradise with its lush landscapes and vibrant colors are mirrored in near-death experiences, too.
They are.
People describe these otherworldly realms that seem more real than Earth.
Yes.
Filled with incredible life and beauty.
It's as if, our earthly concept of beauty is just this faint reflection of the true beauty that awaits us in heaven.
Right.
This beauty that's not just visual, but also spiritual, rooted in the very essence of God's love.
We can't talk about heaven without acknowledging the reality of hell.
Yes.
And those accounts can be unsettling.
They can be.
Especially the visions that some of the saints have had. But I think it's important to approach those visions with a sense of reverence and understanding.
Absolutely.
They're not meant to scare us.
No.
But to serve as warnings.
Warnings,
Also conversion,
right.
urging us to turn away from sin and embrace God's mercy.
I agree.
So how do we even begin to unpack those visions? What are some of the common elements that emerge?
I think the most consistent and perhaps the most terrifying element is this overwhelming sense of darkness and separation from God.
Right.
St. Faustina Kowalska, for instance, described hell as a place of great torture, where the primary torment is the loss of God.
Wow.
It's not just physical suffering,
right,
but this profound spiritual isolation.
I see.
This state of being utterly cut off from the source of all love and light.
It really is a sobering thought.
It is.
That the greatest torment in hell is not physical pain,
No.
but the eternal absence of God.
That's right. And what's striking is how this resonates with some of the more harrowing NDE accounts.
Yes.
Where individuals describe encountering this overwhelming darkness.
Right.
A feeling of profound loneliness and despair.
Wow.
And it underscores the essential truth that our souls are created for communion with God.
Right.
And separation from Him is the ultimate form of suffering.
Then there are these descriptions of torment by demonic beings.
Yes.
Which appear in both saintly visions and NDEs. It can be pretty disturbing.
It can.
You know, the children of Fatima, for example.
Yes.
They had this terrifying vision of hell where they saw demons tormenting souls in a sea of fire.
It's hard to reconcile these accounts with our understanding of a loving God, but I think it's important to remember that God doesn't send anyone to hell.
That's right.
It's a choice made by the soul to reject God's love and mercy.
So these visions serve as stark warnings about the consequences of choosing to turn away from God.
They do. They remind us of the gravity of sin and the urgency of seeking forgiveness and reconciliation with God.
Right.
It's a reminder that our choices have eternal consequences.
And it's not just visual torment either.
No.
There's often an auditory element as well.
Absolutely.
Descriptions of the sounds of suffering.
Yes.
And screams.
Yes. Think about St. John Bosco's dream where he saw these young men falling into this abyss, and he emphasized their screams of terror.
Wow.
And similarly, some NDE accounts describe hearing these horrific cries of anguish and regret coming from souls in torment.
It adds another layer of depth and intensity to these experiences.
Uh-huh.
So we've talked about heaven and hell,
yes,
which are pretty weighty topics.
Uh-huh.
What about purgatory?
Right.
Where does that fit into this whole picture of the afterlife?
I think purgatory is often misunderstood.
Oh.
It's not a third place like heaven or hell,
right,
but rather a state of purification.
Okay.
For those who have died in God's grace, but are not yet fully cleansed of the effects of sin.
So it's not about punishment.
No.
But about being made ready for the fullness of God's presence.
Exactly. The saints who have had visions of purgatory often describe it as a place of cleansing fire,
Okay.
but not a fire of torment.
Right.
Think of it more like a fire of divine love.
I see.
A fire that burns away all that is not pure and prepares the soul for union with God.
Are there any particular accounts that stand out to you?
Well, St. Perpetua's vision of her deceased brother Dinocrates is a powerful one.
Okay.
She initially saw him suffering in this dark place, but after praying for him, she had another vision where he was cleansed, joyful, and drinking freely from a fountain.
Wow.
And I think it speaks to the transformative power of prayer and its ability to assist souls in their journey through purgatory.
It really does speak to the power of our prayers for those who have passed on.
It does. And St. Gertrude the Great, who also had many visions of purgatory, described the souls there as experiencing these purifying flames of divine love.
Right.
And she emphasized the importance of our prayers. And the offering of masses for the dead as these acts of charity can help to alleviate their suffering and hasten their purification.
It's interesting how these visions connect with some of the NDE accounts.
Yes.
Where people describe this sense of cleansing or being tested, but not in a punishing way.
Exactly.
Or like undergoing some spiritual refinement before moving on.
Yes. One man who had an NDE, for instance, described feeling the weight of all his selfish actions and how they had hurt others.
Okay.
But he didn't experience it as punishment. Instead, it was as if he was being purified.
I see.
Made whole before moving on to this higher state of being.
Even though purgatory isn't technically heaven,
right,
there's still that element of hope.
Yes.
That movement towards greater union with God.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from these accounts.
Yeah.
Whether they come from the saints or those who have had NDEs, they remind us that even after death, God's mercy continues to work in us, drawing us closer to Him.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But that's what makes exploring these topics so fascinating.
Yes.
You know, we get to grapple with these profound questions about life, death, and eternity.
Absolutely.
In a way that's both informative and deeply moving.
I agree. And what's so compelling is that these accounts, while offering us these glimpses into the afterlife, also challenge us to live our lives here and now with greater purpose and intentionality.
I see.
Knowing that our choices have eternal significance.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I find so fascinating about these accounts from both the saints and those who have had NDEs is this element of a life review.
It's both intriguing and a little bit daunting. You know, the idea that when we die, we'll see our lives played back to us.
It is.
And not just from our own perspective, but from the perspective of those we've impacted.
It's a powerful concept, and it ties in so beautifully with the Catholic understanding of judgment.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about God standing there with a checklist judging our every action.
Right.
It's more about us coming face to face with the truth of our lives, seeing the ripple effects of our choices, both good and bad.
It makes you think about how important it is to live a life aligned with our values.
Yes.
Knowing that one day we'll see the full impact of our actions on others.
Exactly. These accounts challenge us to consider not just what we believe, but how we live.
Yeah.
How we treat others, how we use the gifts that God has given us.
I've read accounts of NDEs where people describe feeling this incredible sense of love and understanding during their life review.
Yes.
Even when they're confronting their mistakes.
That's right. It's not about shame or condemnation.
Okay.
Think about Dr. Mary Neal, the spinal surgeon who had an NDE after a drowning accident. She described seeing her life not as a series of successes or failures, but as a tapestry of relationships and connections.
Wow.
She felt the joy that she had brought to others, and yes, the pain she had caused, but she experienced it all through this lens of God's love and mercy.
That's so powerful.
It speaks to the transformative power of God's mercy. It doesn't erase the consequences of our actions, but it allows us to see them in a new light.
Okay.
A light of forgiveness and healing.
I was thinking about those lines from the Divine Mercy Chaplet.
Yes.
For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world.
Yes.
It's like even in the face of our brokenness, God's mercy is there to meet us, to lift us up.
It's a beautiful connection, and I think that's a key message that emerges from these accounts of the afterlife.
Right.
Yes, there's judgment, there's accountability, but ultimately it's a message of hope, a message of God's unwavering love and desire for our salvation.
Another recurring element, particularly in NDEs, is this encounter with a threshold or a boundary of some kind.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is like a gate or a river.
Yes.
A field of flowers, or even just this sense of reaching a point of no return.
Right. And often people describe being given a choice to stay in this other realm or to return to Earth.
It's like they're given a glimpse of what's to come, and then they're sent back with a renewed sense of purpose.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it, and it reminds me of St. Paul's writings, where he talks about this longing for heaven, this desire to be fully united with Christ, but also recognizing that he still had work to do on earth.
I see.
He describes this tension between wanting to be with God and understanding that our earthly lives have meaning and purpose.
And that really does resonate with what many people who have had NDEs describe.
It does.
They come back with this incredible awareness of the afterlife, but also have to figure out how to integrate that experience into their everyday lives.
Absolutely. And it's not always easy. They often come back with this profound sense of peace about death, but they also have to navigate the challenges and complexities of living in a world that doesn't always understand or accept their experiences.
It must be such a challenge to try to articulate something so profound.
It is.
You know, so beyond our normal understanding.
It is. And I think that's why these accounts are so valuable. They give us this glimpse into a reality that we can only dimly comprehend.
Right.
And they remind us that our earthly lives are just a part of a much larger story.
Right.
A story that ultimately leads us back to God.
And even those who've had glimpses of hell in their NDEs
Yes.
often come back transformed.
They do.
It's as if that experience, however terrifying, served as a catalyst for profound change in their lives.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It is.
Even just a brief encounter with that kind of spiritual darkness can be a wake-up call.
Yeah.
A spur to reorient their lives towards God.
Do you have any particular examples of that?
Well, there's the story of Howard Storm, who we mentioned earlier. Before his NDE, he was a self-proclaimed atheist. But after experiencing what he described as hell, he had this radical conversion experience. He became a Christian pastor and devoted his life to sharing his story and helping others find faith.
It's an incredible example of how these experiences, even the difficult ones, can lead to profound spiritual awakening.
Yes.
It speaks to God's ability to reach us even in the darkest of places.
It really does. It highlights that it's never too late to turn back to God to seek his mercy and forgiveness.
So if we step back for a moment,
yes,
what are some key takeaways that we can glean from all these accounts of the afterlife from both the saints and those who've had NDEs?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is this affirmation of hope.
Okay.
These accounts remind us that death is not the end, that our souls are eternal, and that there's something more beyond this life, something far greater than we can imagine.
It's comforting to know that our earthly lives are not all there is, that we're part of this grander story that unfolds in eternity.
It is, and they offer us this glimpse of the incredible love and mercy that awaits us in God's presence.
Yeah.
But they also challenge us, don't they?
They do.
They challenge us to examine our own lives,
right,
to make choices that lead us towards that love and light, and to live with eternity in mind.
And it's not just about satisfying our curiosity about the afterlife.
No.
It's about letting these insights shape how we live our lives now in the present moment.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our choices have eternal significance, that how we treat others, how we love, how we forgive, all of these things matter, not just for our earthly lives, but for our soul's eternal journey.
Yeah, it really does make you stop and think.
It does.
Knowing that our souls are eternal and that this life is just a preparation for something so much greater.
It is a perspective shift.
Yeah.
And as Catholics, we're so blessed to have these teachings and these incredible testimonies to guide us
absolutely
on our journey.
We have this rich tradition of exploring these mysteries. And it's not just about intellectual understanding, is it?
No, it's about encountering the living God, experiencing his love and mercy in a tangible way.
It's one thing to read about heaven
yes,
or purgatory in a catechism.
Yes.
But it's another thing entirely.
It is.
To hear someone describe what it felt like to be there.
Right?
To experience those realms.
Absolutely.
Even if just for a glimpse.
Yes, it brings those concepts to life in a way that simply reading about them can't.
That's why I think these personal accounts, both from the saints and those who've had NDEs, are so compelling. They offer us these windows into a reality that's often beyond our grasp.
Yes.
But at the same time, they resonate so deeply with our hearts.
They do, and they remind us that these aren't just abstract concepts or theological ideas, but real spiritual realities that we should be mindful of. In our daily lives, they're not meant to scare us, but to inspire us, to encourage us to live our lives in a way that prepares us for eternity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the afterlife, what's the one thing you would want our listeners to take away from this?
I would say don't wait until you're on your deathbed to start thinking about eternity.
Okay.
Live your life in a way that prepares you for that ultimate encounter with God, for entering into his presence with a heart full of love and a soul that's been purified by his grace.
That's beautifully put. What are some practical steps that our listeners can take to do that? We're all busy. We all have our daily lives, our responsibilities. How do we make space for eternity in the midst of all of that?
I think it starts with nurturing your relationship with God.
Okay.
Make time for prayer, even if it's just a few minutes each day. Attend Mass, regularly receive the sacraments, especially the Eucharist and confession.
And don't underestimate the power of confession.
Absolutely.
It's like hitting the reset button on our souls.
It is.
Allowing us to experience God's mercy and forgiveness in a tangible way.
Exactly. And then practice charity, love your neighbor, serve those in need, let your faith shine through your actions. It's about making our lives a reflection of God's love in the world.
It's like we're building up treasure in heaven.
Yes.
While we're still here on earth.
Beautifully put, and never stop learning about your faith.
Okay.
Read the scriptures, study the lives of the saints, engage in thoughtful discussions about these mysteries, deepen our understanding, and allow those insights to transform us from the inside out.
Because knowledge is power.
It is.
Especially when it comes to matters of faith.
Absolutely. And lastly, remember that God is a God of mercy.
Yeah.
Even if you've made mistakes, even if you feel far from him, his love is always there waiting for you to turn back to him. His arms are always open wide.
That is such a beautiful message of hope. Thank you for taking us on this incredible journey.
It's been a pleasure as always.
And to you, dear listener, as you continue on your journey of faith, may you always be filled with God's grace and blessings. May the hope of heaven and the promise of eternal life sustain you. And may you find peace and joy in knowing that you are infinitely loved by the God who created you and who longs to be united with you forever. Until next time.